Let's take a look at row 1 of the rubric. You'll see that in this extended version of the rubric, beneath each row, there is a section titled Decision Rules and Scoring Notes, which further describes responses at each level of performance. These notes include guiding questions which work as decision rules for how to score that particular row. As we work through the rubric rows, you may find it helpful to highlight the key words that indicate the differences between levels, so that you have it for reference later. So, row 1 is about the proficiency, understand and analyse context. This row looks at whether the research is clearly focused through an approach, perspective or lens, and whether it is selected well enough to allow for substantial, complex contextualising of the team's problem or issue. At the high level, the report situates the student's investigation in research that draws upon a wide variety of appropriate sources, and the significance is made clear. At the medium level, the report is adequately focused, with some variety in sources, and it makes reference to the overall problem or issue. At the lower level, the report is overly broad and shows little evidence of research. It makes no connection, or only a simplistic connection, to the overall problem or issue. Our guiding question for this row is the area of investigation focused and situated in the student's research? To answer this question, there are a few places you should look. Firstly, we need to know what the research report is specifically about to know if it's focused. So a good place to start is looking at the title and the first few paragraphs. In the titles, you are looking for if the team's research problem or issue is clearly stated. Is the approach, the perspectives or lens clear? Or is it left for the reader to infer? Is the focus or scope of the research sufficiently but not overly narrow? For example, the title of the Rhino Horns paper, Sample 1, clearly signals the topic and a lens, global legalization and political considerations. The introduction to the report also signals the complexity of the issue, and the body of the report further engages the complexity. This is important to reach the highest level in the rubric. Compare that to the topic for Sample 5, cyberbullying. This topic is overly broad and the exact focus of the report is unclear, as it asks the question at the top, does cyberbullying affect teens today? But the report goes on to list tips for children, parents and schools on how to avoid it. Now contrast that sample to Sample 3, the environmental impacts of war, which is certainly more focused as a topic than cyberbullying, but the report tries to deal with many variables in this topic, like types of pollution, displacement and resettlement, physical damage, impact on animals and wildlife, so it could have benefited from further narrowing to allow more focused research and reporting. In the first few paragraphs of the report, you should also look for the significance of what they're researching to be made clear. This is the so what factor, or why does it matter? To score high in this row, the significance of the student's investigation needs to be made clear. The next place to look in order to answer our guiding question is the bibliography or work cited. Here you're looking for if the bibliography or work cited shows evidence of careful source selection. This row is focused on the proficiency, understand and analyse context, so the sources students choose to include should help them address the real complexity of the problem or issue they are researching. So simplistic journalistic sources are unlikely to be the most useful. Remember too, the task asks for a well-researched report. If the research has been very superficial, then it will not score highly in this row. In the rubric, the descriptors say wide variety of appropriate sources, some variety or little evidence of research. In the context of AP seminar, the term appropriate sources would usually mean academic sources. Unless the topic dictates otherwise, academic sources should be used to score highly in this row. Remember, as part of their AP seminar course, students have learned how to evaluate the relevance and credibility of sources of information and data, and that needs to be actively demonstrated in what they select to go in their report. The next slide shows an example. The Rhino Horns paper, Sample 1, balances academic journals, like the Georgetown Journal of International Affairs, Annals of the Association of American Geographers, with primary sources, for example the Science Treaty and the NGO websites. Two more journalistic sources, the Science Magazine and The Economist, provide additional general context, but the report does not overly rely on those sources. Compare the Rhino bibliography and its use to that provided for the report, The Psychological Effects of Terrorism. The terrorism report lists a variety of sources, including the Journal of International Criminal Justice. Tellingly, this academic source is never referenced in the body of the report. Instead, the report many times draws from journalistic sources, like the International Business Times, or from specialized reference sources, like the APA website articles or journalist resource. While these journalistic sources and specialised reference sources are valuable for preliminary research, they are not generally the most appropriate ending points for academic research. If a student chooses to use these specialised reference sources instead of primary sources, the case for credibility needs to be explicitly made. Now look at the citations page for the sample Cyberbullying. This report references 3 sources all derived from the same article. As only one source was used, this would fall into the Little Evidence of Research category and score 2 for this row. So, to recap for row 1, the question to ask is the area of investigation focused and situated in the student's research? If the answer is no, it will score low or 2 points. These responses are typically overly broad and general and show little evidence of research, drawing on poor quality sources. If the answer is yes, but it doesn't address the complexity of the issue, or lacks academic or scholarly sources, it will score medium or 4 points. If the answer is yes, and the report is sufficiently focused to address complexity, it makes use of academic or primary sources, and the significance to a larger context is made clear, it will score high or 6 points in this row. Before moving on, it is worth just considering some of the instructions on the first page of the rubric and scoring notes. On the front page of the rubric and scoring notes, you can see the description of when 0 scores should be applied. It's important to note that reporting out on research is the basic foundation of this task, so if there's no evidence of any research present, then the report will score 0 in rows 1 to 4, and effectively row 5 as well, as there would be no citation present. If you see a report that is really only a set of opinions, then you should score it 0 in these rows.